It is Global Order. I am Hindol Sengupta. After a long time, Ambassador Prabhat Shukla is back to talk to me. Ambassador Shukla is somebody who has made so many predictions in his conversations with me, and all those predictions, whether it's about Russia, whether it's about China, they have all come true. There is no better person, often I feel, in Delhi, in global relations and international relations, to talk about things than Prabhat Shukla. Ambassador, I'm so delighted that you could join us again.
Thank you, Hindol. And with that stirring introduction, I should again thank you for inviting me. Always a pleasure to talk to you. And I must tell you that I learn a lot from you.
Thank you, sir. That's very kind of you. I want to, of course, begin by talking to you about Iran. We are talking on a really important day, Ambassador. Larijani, one of the most vital cogs of the vast Iranian wheel, so to speak, of the Islamic Republic, is supposedly dead. A man who was a scholar of Kant, a man who was, in a sense, described himself as a religious fundamentalist and yet was interested in everything from Western mathematics to philosophy, and really understood in many ways the West, is now dead. It's been announced officially now that he's dead. Many people believe this once again is a turning point. Let's begin there, sir. Talk to me about where you see this conflict at this point in time.
Yeah, sure. What I would suggest by way of preface is, I'll make one or two general observations, and then we'll get into the substance. And for me, actually, unlike much of the commentary that we are hearing and reading, which begins at 9:40 a.m. Tehran time on the 28th of February, my narrative will begin on 7th October 2023, because I think that is really where the current round of bloodletting began. So that is one general observation. The other thing that I would say is that we are also heading towards Nowruz. It's I think this year it's on the 20th. Frequently it's on the 21st, but I believe some of my Iranian friends have told me it's going to be the 20th this time. And I think 19th, which is tomorrow, is when Ramzan ends. So it's a remarkable kind of coincidence. And if there's any slippage, then we'll have a problem which Iran has faced before, which is whether to observe Ramzan and Eid or to observe Nowruz. And that's a very tricky problem for the country as a whole and for the society. The third general observation that I'd make is that we need a clear-eyed view of Iran. There's a lot of sympathetic assessments of what the poor Iranians have gone through, and it's true, they have suffered a lot. But we must never forget that people like Ayatollah Khamenei have never spoken well about India. Repeatedly, they have criticized India for its alleged mishandling of Muslims, whether it was the amendments to Article 370 or the Delhi riots. They have always said that, the government is friendly to us, but they must control the Hindu extremists. So I think, these kind of points are necessary by way of background. Now, to answer your immediate question, look, I think the decapitation of the Iranian leadership goes on. And I think you're quite right in your assessment that after the Ayatollah himself, and we don't know the position regarding his son. Ali Larijani was probably the most pivotal figure in the power establishment. And by the way, he's not the only one who has been killed. Many others. And along with him, his son was killed. And separately, and this is also very significant, the head of the Basij, who is also Soleimani. I don't know if he's related to the old Qasim Soleimani, but this was Ghulam Raza Soleimani, has also been killed. And the Basij really are the people who have been cracking heads on the streets. So I think the decapitation that has gone on from the 28th of February is very significant. And people may say what they like about how many layers there are of government and so on. No, these things will take a heavy toll on the way Iran conducts its future operations and its future relations. So I think I agree with you that this is a pivotal change.
Now, I have a question, Ambassador, if I may. There has been an assessment ever since this war began that unlike, say, in Iraq and in other places that the Americans, in a sense, have had this kind of military operations, the Iranian society is structured a bit, in fact, the administration also is structured a bit differently. One of the things that many people have mentioned is, of course, the Basij. You just mentioned it. Now, the Basij, of course, as all of us know, is an extremely indoctrinated, for the lack of a word, a civil militia sort of an organization, which actually penetrates in every layer of Iranian society, and often it's difficult to distinguish a member of the Basij and quote unquote just another Iranian, so to speak. So therefore, the hold is much deeper. You cannot really, in a sense, decapitate the head, as it were, of administration, and the society does not collapse. That's one of the things. The other is that, contrary to what perhaps information that reaches us and reaches the West, this idea that there is absolutely no support of the Islamic regime within the larger Iranian population may not be entirely correct, and therefore that gives it resilience and depth. And the third thing is that even though so many of its top leaders have now been killed, there does not seem to be any palpable sign yet, and I say very carefully yet, that an immediate regime change of some sort is going to happen in Iran. I want to put all these three questions to you, Ambassador, to ask you what you think about them.
Firstly, as far as the structures are concerned, I think that is a fair point, and I think we are seeing it in action. So that, while the top leadership in the army, the IRGC, the political leadership, the clerical leadership have all been hit very hard, it hasn't reduced Iran's capabilities in terms of launching of missiles and so on. So I think the first part is a fair observation. But of course, there is one limitation, which is just one of numbers, because both sides are expending their ammunition at a fearsome rate, and which one will run out first is an aspect that we need to look at. And Iran may well be getting some support clandestine from other quarters also, whereas as far as America and Israel are concerned, I think as far as their munitions are concerned, they have what they have. But both of them have a fairly active industrial capacity, so they can ramp it up. As far as the other aspects are concerned, look, why are we not seeing the kind of movement on the streets that would herald the arrival of some kind of popular resistance? And can they in fact distinguish between themselves and the Basij? The answers are quite clear, actually. As far as distinguishing is concerned, you and I may not know the Basij from a non-Basij, but the people who have suffered at their hands, they jolly well know. And they'll be able to spot them out and settle with them if they will not change their colors. Why aren't they out on the streets? That's because of two things. One, the Western leaders have advised the people of Iran to stay home. And they've said, when the time is right, we will announce that you can move out and take over the government. That's how Trump began. And I think that message has been repeated a couple of times. So that would be one part. The other part is probably more effective, which is that the Iranian leaders have made it clear that any unauthorized person who is out on the street will be treated as an enemy and will be shot. And they have shown in January that they don't fight shy of killing their own people. So I think put these two together, I think that might explain why we haven't seen the kind of street action and demonstrations that we saw in early January. But again, it may not be far away. That's why I mentioned Nowruz, because Nowruz is one of those things where people do come out and celebrate. And what is the Iranian government going to do? So that's something which we will need to watch very carefully.
Team change question, Ambassador. There was an anticipation, at least perhaps among some Israeli and American quarters, that a regime change will occur faster than perhaps has occurred. Now, a sort of feeling seems to have developed, including among some Gulf nations and their leadership, that God forbid this campaign ends with the runt of a bitter, even more embittered Islamic regime still in control in Iran, which might vitiate the atmosphere in West Asia for many decades to come. How do you look at that question?
Look, I am comparing with, I just put aside finished a book called King of Kings. It's about the fall of the Shah. And the fall of the Shah itself took a very long time. The first of the movements began in I think, summertime 1978. And gradually they chipped away at different aspects. And it was only by January that the Shah left. So frankly, this regime has implanted itself much more firmly than the Shah ever did. So it's not surprising to me that it's taking time. I would venture to say that the end is not in doubt, not for me. It's a question of time. But I think they will not survive. They may survive this round, they may survive another round, but honestly speaking, they have zero legitimacy. We may talk about people staying home or street demonstrations in support, but that's all hollow. They have no legitimacy. And I think as far as the Western, or rather, let's say the US is concerned, we can talk about Israel separately, because I think there are different motivations there. But I think as far as the Americans are concerned, they have zeroed now trust in this particular government and any government of this stripe. And their immediate concern was their nuclear plan. Now, this is being poo-pooed by many people, especially in the media, but this is a genuine fear. And the IAEA had itself rung alarm bells in May 2025, saying that they have been using advanced centrifuges and therefore they are within days of reaching weapons grade uranium, which is why they had to take action in June in order to cripple exactly these kind of activities. So, when people say that, oh, there was no imminent threat, I think, frankly, they're playing politics with facts.
What's going to be my other question, Ambassador? How do you see Iran's nuclear program go from here? Do you think that there will genuinely be a sort of positive regime change as far as the Americans are concerned and the Israelis are concerned, in the sense that a regime would come into play in Iran, which would replace the existing Islamic regime, which in fact would put some sort of a lid on the enrichment of uranium and the nuclear program? How likely is that? And indeed, if it's likely, according to you, how long do you think it might take?
Yeah, look, that's a very good question, and one that I have also been trying to answer to myself. The actual process of seeking enrichment goes back to the Shah's days. In his last days, he had already reached an agreement with the French, which of course was cancelled after the Islamic Revolution. But therefore, your question is entirely valid. Even if you do remove this government, are you positive that the next one will not pick up where they left off? The answer is twofold. I think one, to the extent that we can make any forecast, if Raza Pahlavi is any indicator, he has said quite clearly that they will not pursue the nuclear weapons option. And, it's very curious, actually. I was looking into these data. Iran has been saying all along that their enrichment facilities are for nuclear power generation. But they are, at the moment, generating only 2% of their electricity, not primary power. Just the electricity, 2% is all they are producing. And that too they are producing from a Russian developed plant in Bushehr, for which the uranium is also supplied by the Russians. So the entire enrichment process done by the Iranians has gone in a totally different direction. And as has been pointed out, you don't need 60% enrichment for any conceivable civilian use. And by the way, it wasn't only 60%. One of the last IAEA reports actually mentions that they discovered elements that were enriched to 83.7%. Now, the important thing here is that, the bomb that was dropped on Hiroshima was a uranium-enriched bomb, and the U-235 element there was 80%. So 80% actually is enough to make an explosive device. All the material did not go through the fission process in August 1945, but it caused enough damage anyway. So Iran was obviously very close. And I think this is going to have to be completely dismantled. I think a lot of it has been done. But whatever little remains, I think whichever government replaces this, one of the early conditions that they are going to have to meet is to allow total inspection by IAEA and perhaps even by the individual countries to make sure that there is no possible danger from their nuclear program. And as Trump has been saying, they stand for zero enrichment. And I think that is what they are going to impose. By the by, 2 decades later, things will change. They may get a president who is not quite so hard-headed, and they may get a government which is again willing to chance its arm. But I've never really quite understood why Iran wanted nuclear weapons, except that they wanted to make good on their threat to wipe out Israel.
Absolutely. I was about to say that, well, our Israeli friends will always tell us again and again that, well, even though this perhaps, our minds find it a bit difficult to wrap around this thing, but the threat to wipe out, what they think of as their civilizational, ideological, theological enemy, in a very, macabre sort of way is perhaps true. This is what they want.
Yeah, and what's more, they also tell us, which I think is again perfectly legitimate, that we have learned the hard way to take words seriously. They're referring to Mein Kampf. But it's not only that, but also that, you see actually what, and that's why I say the clock should begin on 7th October 2023.
Yes.
They had actually established a ring of fire around Israel and backed it up with their nuclear plans, so that in effect they really could make good on this threat. I've heard people say that those were empty words, but no, I don't. I find that very hard to believe. And it's all right. You're sitting in a TV studio, and you can say, "Oh, they're just empty words, not to be taken seriously." But if you're at the receiving end of that, and you are seeing the kind of death squads that are growing up all around you, you have to understand that action needed to be taken. And action has been taken, I think, quite effectively. So the ring of fire has been broken, and now they are going for the heart of the strategy, which is in Tehran.
Talk a little bit about the other crisis, of course, Ambassador, the crisis in the Strait of Hormuz. I actually, there's been so much that has been spoken about, which ships are still flying through it, whether India is still being able to move its ships, whether China is this, that, and the other. I have a different question to ask you, which is that what is the lesson that a country like India should take from what has happened in the Hormuz Strait? Considering it too has very vulnerable sea lines, and indeed the mouth of its, in a sense, its waters in the Bay of Bengal go all the way up to the mouth of the Malacca Strait, which of course the Chinese are really vitally worried about consistently and have been for many years. What are the lessons for a country like India to take away from this almost unprecedented crisis in the Hormuz Strait?
Well, to answer the first part of your question, there's a very intriguing discrepancy coming out from within Tehran itself. What you might call the secular or the elected segments, they are all saying that the straits are open. And occasionally with a caveat that they are open to all except Israel and the US. But if you read Mujtaba Khamenei's first testament, he says categorically that the Strait of Hormuz must be closed, and the IRGC is saying the same thing. I think it is partly closed, but certainly Chinese and I think Pakistani ships are being allowed through. I think ours are also getting through, probably on a case-by-case basis. And of course, the important thing here is that Iran's own ships are, of course, getting through. Now, you might ask why, how come they are doing this? Because the southern tip of the Strait of Hormuz is under Omani control. So it's not as if they cannot take some action or whatever you can do in terms of diplomacy. But evidently it is not happening. And so Iran's exports are still at between 1.5 million barrels a day and 2 million barrels a day, which means that they are still earning a lot of revenue. Now, of course, about 90% of that is going to China. So they are earning a lot of yuan. I don't know what they can do with that yuan because, you can spend it only in Russia and China. I don't think anybody else would accept any large amounts of yuan. So maybe they're just accumulating the yuan and they will settle it at some later date with the Chinese themselves. As far as a lesson for India is concerned, honestly, when even a country like America can do very little, there's just so much that any other country can also do. I think it would be good for us to strengthen our Navy, but I would hesitate to move in this direction on a large scale and in a short period of time. And I'm saying this because our more immediate concerns are on our land borders. So while we do need to strengthen the Navy and strengthen our cooperation with the, first of all, in the given situation, with the Gulf Arabs, and gradually I think we need to co-opt a future Iranian dispensation in the same arrangement so that we do have some assurance. As for Malacca, there is that idea, about the Kra Peninsula. I don't know if it will go anywhere because our opposition to that within Thailand itself is very strong. So, although they've been talking about the Kra Peninsula for decades, nothing has moved so far. But that is certainly a solution to China's Malacca dilemma, and perhaps that's why it isn't moving forward, because others don't want to solve that dilemma for the Chinese.
At the very least, India should fast track its Nicobar project, isn't it, Ambassador? There have been usual sort of pushbacks on that project, but that project does seem vital, especially considering what has happened in the last few weeks.
Oh, absolutely. No, look, when I say we shouldn't rush into any kind of upgrading and all that, it doesn't mean we should sit tight. Absolutely not. Actually, my view is that we need to be doing a lot more on our defense side. After a lot of pulling and pushing this year, the budget has gone up to 2% of the GDP. That's way too short, Too small. We need to be in the 3.5 to 4% range.
Correct.
And make up for lost time. Since 1993, we have been starving our military. So, you can look at any of the figures for the Air Force, for the Army, everywhere the picture is rather bleak. So we need to step up our spending. And listen, we are the fourth largest economy in the world. We have foreign exchange reserves of close to $700 billion. Yes. There's no reason at all not to be spending more on our defense.
Let me also ask you, this war in Iran has thrown the greater sort of, future planning, if I were to call it that, of West Asia a bit awry. I'm talking, of course, of the UAE, which seems imperiled a bit. Also, Saudi Arabia. I mean, many of its grand plans, including the great vision of what Saudi Arabia would do by 2030, the NEOM that it was going to build, the futuristic city in the desert, all of those plans seem to now be getting pushed back. There are pressures on revenue, both in Saudi Arabia and in the UAE. How does this conflict, in your opinion, change this entire vision of a carefully crafted, relatively open and becoming more open West Asia that was emerging, especially at the heart of it, cities like Dubai, city states like Dubai, and even parts of of Saudi Arabia and others, providing a sort of heaven, as it were, an oasis in the desert for business, for enterprise, and so on and so forth. All of this under a shadow now.
Yeah, it's all under a question mark, and a lot will depend on how long the war lasts. See, the first thing I would say about Dubai in particular, and Saudi Arabia as well, though I don't know Saudi Arabia as well as I think I know Dubai, not so much the UAE as Dubai, there's a lot of resilience there. And the kind of openness that they had adopted as a policy had stood them in very good stead. Now, I'm told already some capital is moving out. Now,
the real estate sector, for instance, Ambassador, the Dubai real estate sector seems to be hit, for instance, just as one example.
Absolutely, exactly. So, if it lasts long, and it seems to me that Iran is deliberately targeting Dubai rather more than the other areas, which is also quite odd because where they are hitting, there are no American military bases. So they are obviously, this is part of their economic warfare also. Plus which, of course, they have that long-standing argument with the Emirates about those three islands in the Gulf, the Abu Musa and the Greater and Lesser Tums. So I think they have a particular grouse against the Emirates. But my assessment has been always that they are particularly resilient. So if the war doesn't drag on a lot longer, I think they should be able to bounce back. And, look, we are reaching a stage in the global economy where outlets for investment are actually shrinking. And whatever we do have is getting more and more speculative. So you can look at gold, for example, or you can look at the stock markets. They're all very volatile today. And the reason is that, nobody's quite confident about the future. Or look at even cryptos. They're bouncing all over the place. So it's probable that someone like Dubai could offer a good, stable environment. But look, Dubai alone is too small to achieve anything. They will need a tie-in with some of their Gulf neighbors. And of course, Saudi Arabia stands out as the classic example. And here it's possible that the plans of MBS and the Emiratis could merge or could cooperate together, although at the moment their relations are not very good, as you know, because they've been having trouble over Aden. So we'll have, this is the thing, there's so many wheels within wheels and so much instability. Whatever you pick up, you have to see, and you have to see how it will unravel. But that's probably what makes it more interesting for students of these affairs like you and me.
One last question, Ambassador, which of course, I can't let you go without tackling this, and especially you, who knows more about China than most other people. There has been a lot of conversation, Ambassador, on how the Chinese have reacted or indeed have not reacted to this war in Iran,
Mm.
and what we can learn from how the Chinese intend to, act in the future. How they would respond to Taiwan, what they would do in future crises, how they plan to, in a sense, play out their role in the changing world order. I wonder what your thoughts on this are. As you watch China, as you've seen it react to this crisis, even as of course there's a transition happening within China, which we've discussed before, the conflict between Xi Jinping and the PLA. As you've seen China react to this, what have been your thoughts?
That's a very good question. And I guess it's something which all of us have on their minds. The first thing is that there is a growing body of opinion. I'm not yet fully persuaded, but there may be something to it, which is that, the US strategy of now they have got their grip on Venezuela. If they can also get their grip on Iran, they have got their grip on China's energy supplies.
Right.
Barring the Russians, and I think they will be tackling the Russian issue soon enough, once these immediate serious problems are out of the way. So I think this is a line of inquiry which I am watching, but at the moment I have an open mind. Could this be the driver? I don't think so. The driver is very clearly, on the American side, the fear of a nuclear weapon and deliverable systems, missiles. And on the Israeli side, both that and the sheer question of survival, especially after 7th October. So I don't think this is the driver, but it's certainly something to watch and see how it all pans out. Will they indeed take over the Iranian oil industry? So far, you must have noticed, the Americans have not attacked Iranian oil facilities. The day they choose to do that, Iran will be forced to capitulate. But they have attacked Karg Island, but not the oil facilities.
No, exactly.
So,
And there was a lot of talk about how they were going to take down the Karg facilities and so on and so forth.
yeah,
That hasn't happened at the moment.
yes, exactly. And actually, Treasury Secretary of the US, Mr. Bessent, actually gave an explanation for this, and he said the reason is we don't want a very major jump in oil prices. So if you take out the Iranian exports, then prices will touch probably 150, maybe even more, to a barrel. Yeah. So I guess this is one of the lines of reasoning. Now, I think the Chinese have, both America and China are playing a very cautious game vis-a-vis each other. Then they are expecting a visit by Trump, and they say it is being postponed. So let's see if that happens and when it is rescheduled. But for that reason, I think they would not openly confront the Americans. So, it's a very curious thing. The Bahrainis had submitted a resolution in the Security Council condemning Iraq for its attack on the Arabs in the Gulf region. Now, firstly, remarkably, it got 135 co-sponsors, which is a UN record, which tells us also that at least at the diplomatic level, Iran is quite isolated. But the second part is that when it came up in the Security Council, China could have vetoed, Russia could have vetoed, but they both abstained. It's a very curious thing that has happened. And even Hamas has criticized Iran for attacking the Arab neighbors. So I should imagine that this is why these two reasons, one, the question of the visit by Trump, and the fact that there is not much diplomatic support for what Iran is doing. And the Chinese are still in a fairly cautious frame of mind. As you mentioned, because of the fragility of the balance of power within China right now, they are playing it very cautiously. So that would be the reasoning from my point of view. But one thing does concern me, and that is that we know now that, for example, the Americans have pulled out some of their missiles, defense missiles, the THAAD missiles from South Korea. And it makes me wonder whether either our North Korean friends might be tempted to play their hand, or if this war drags on, as we have seen in the case of Ukraine also, the American defensive positions in Taiwan are not what they need to be to deter Chinese action. So this is a running theme, and this is something which does worry me, because the Trumpian position on Taiwan has been less than clear and less than categoric as compared to even Biden's position. So that's where this issue stands. The Russians, on the other hand, have given Iran much more substantive support, particularly in terms of intelligence, which is one of the most important angles in modern war fighting.
Fascinating. No doubt this will now take perhaps many weeks before greater clarity emerges. And it was, as always, wonderful talking to you, Ambassador, about many aspects of this rather volatile situation. We will be tracking this closely, and no doubt we'll have other opportunities to talk to you in more detail. Thanks very much, Ambassador Prabhat Shukla. As always, highly educative talking to you about what's going on in Iran and ramifications in different parts of the world, including, of course, in China. I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Hindol. Always a pleasure interacting with you. And thank you for your kind words. Maybe next time we talk, we go into greater detail on the broader West Asia issue, like, for example, the Palestinian question.
Yes.
And put it in its historical context.
We will be back with that very shortly in a little while in the second part of this conversation, which we will continue with Ambassador Prabhat Shukla. Thank you, Ambassador, once again for today.
Thank you.
We will be back soon with you once again on Global Order.
Look forward to that. Thank you, Hindol.
And Bye-bye. All you have to do to follow Global Order, of course, is hit that bell icon to follow all our work. And thanks very much indeed. I'm Hindol Sengupta.